Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another Top 10. And today's Top 10 is going to be about a filmmaker who recently had a birthday. A filmmaker that is one of the last great independent filmmakers. He started in the early 80s, and he's in that same kind of group as John Sayles, Hal Hartley, Abel Ferrara, and he is a quintessentially American filmmaker, influenced by Samuel Fuller and Nicholas Ray, but he also has a global view. His films are set in international places, many of them, with an international cast of actors. And as you've probably guessed by now, it's Jim Jarmusch. And that's why I'm wearing these shades in honour of Jarmusch's just sheer coolness. If you've ever heard any of his interviews, or if you've seen any of his making ofs, he's just such a cool guy, and he has such a great dry sense of humour. Now, his films aren't for everybody, I would say. If you're looking for lots of action and things happening all the time, you're maybe wanting to look somewhere else. His films are about character over plot. They're about the people that generally other filmmakers don't show or don't talk about. They're the people that sometimes have fallen between society's cracks. They're the people that you generally don't see in films. And also the locations he picks are generally places that you never really see in films. If Michael Mann shoots LA better than anybody else, then Jarmusch has shot Detroit like nobody else has. He's shot New Orleans like nobody else has. Tangiers, Paris, Rome. He just has a great eye for locations that aren't your usual locations that we see in films. So that's a bit of background. So let's start with the top 10. Now, number 10, I just have a copy DVD of. I don't actually have it on a bought format. And it's Coffee and Cigarettes. This is an episodic film by nature. In the 80s, he did a short film with Iggy Pop and Tom Waits. Yeah, because the other thing about him, he does have a eclectic sense and taste in music, and quite a fantastic taste in music. Anybody who loves Tom Waits is okay in my book. So he uses Tom Waits and Iggy Pop, and Neil Young has scored one of his films. And his soundtracks are always fantastic. But that's an aside, sorry. So he did a short film with Iggy Pop and Tom Waits, and it was them basically just shooting the breeze over coffee and cigarettes. And I think it was like 15 minutes long. So in the early 90s, I think it was 93, he released a feature length version of this essentially. So it's episodic by nature, and I think there's maybe 6 or 7 scenes, and it's just essentially a couple of actors talking nonsense over coffee and cigarettes. There's Tom Waits and Iggy Pop are in it, Steve Coogan, Alfred Molina, a whole host of people. Due to its episodic nature, it's obviously going to be hit and miss. I mean, it's worth checking out, but it's certainly not one of his essential works, as we'll get to later in this list. So that's number 10, Coffee and Cigarettes. And obviously let me know in the comments how many of these you've seen, what you think of them. Give me your top 10 Jarmusch films. So at number 9 is one that I only have on DVD. I'm not sure there is a Blu-ray release of. And that's Limits of Control with Isaac Bankol, which I've probably mispronounced his name. This is one of 2 Jarmusch films featuring a hitman. But because this is Jarmusch, it's an unusual hitman film. This is the solitary man on a mission, and along the way he meets several characters who are involved with the hit, including John Hurt and Tilda Swinton, and again it's on many lavish locations. And again, being Jarmusch, you know, one of the criticisms of Jarmusch might be his films are slow, but I think they're more deliberate. You have to get into the right mindset with Jarmusch, and if you just go along with his films, they're an absolute pleasure. He is one of those filmmakers that can just make an atmosphere and a vibe that is quite unique. He kind of gets you into a certain rhythm of his filmmaking. And so this one might not be as engaging as other films on this list, because of course the job is to break into this unbreakable facility. And of course, Jarmusch being Jarmusch, we never actually see Isaac Bankol how he gets in. He just gets in. And again, I'll try to avoid spoilers for people who haven't seen these films. So again, it's number 9 in the list. It's not my favourite one. And again, if you're new to Jarmusch, probably wouldn't start with Limits of Control. So that's number 9. Number 8 is his debut feature-length film, Stranger Than Paradise. Most of Jarmusch's films are available on Soda Pictures Blu-rays, and you do get some behind the scenes and trailers. The extras aren't amazing, but usually if you get an interview with Jarmusch, it's certainly worth getting. His first film was Permanent Vacation, which I think is about 65 minutes, and it's just one character wandering about. I think that's 1980, and it's certainly not anywhere near his best work, and again I think that's for completists only. But this is 1984, and this is his debut feature, and this is minimalistic, I think you could probably call it. It's about a girl who comes from Czechoslovakia to stay with her long lost cousin, played by John Lowry, and his buddy, and they don't really, played by Richard Edson, and in cinematic terms, in Hollywood terms, nothing much happens, and it almost gets to the point of it's really funny because Jarmusch is almost stretching and seeing how far he can stretch out 3 characters not really doing much, but there is a dry humour to it that obviously runs through Jarmusch's work. Again, it's number 8. It's not my favourite Jarmusch, but it does have pretty much the template for his films. Characters that you normally wouldn't see, a great score, particularly a Screaming Jay Hawkins tune, and just existentially cool characters. So that's number 8, Stranger Than Paradise, his debut feature. Again, maybe not the first one to start with, but certainly worth seeing. So number 7 is another episodic film. It's Night on Earth. Again, this is 1991, I believe. This stars a host of people, and it's about taxi drivers across the globe. The stories don't really... There's no link between them apart from taxi drivers. So, and it has a great score by Tom Waits, and he's a disembodied voice on the radio. So this starts in LA with Gina Rowlands and Winona Ryder, and then it goes to France with Isaac Bancoli again and Beatrice Dahl, and then it goes to Rome with Robert Benigni. It goes to New York after LA with Armin Mueller-Stahl and Giancarlo Esposito, and I've completely drawn a blank on the female, Rosie Perez, sorry, in New York, and then it goes to Robert Benigni in Rome, and then it finishes in Finland. And it's a funny film, it's a great wee film, it's well worth checking out, and it's one of these films that, for a quintessentially American director, he does have a global view, which is kind of rare sometimes for American directors. So he can, again with his characters, he understands that even though there may be language barriers between different nations and different people, there's still a common understanding, but it's never kind of beaten over your head with it. It's just there's an intelligence about his films, there's an intelligence about that attitude of we're all pretty much the same regardless where we are, we all have the same problems. Everybody has kind of their favourite episode in it. The kind of straight comedic one is probably Robert Benigni, who is confessing to a priest in the back of his cab about his amorous adventures, featuring a pumpkin and a sheep. So this is one of his more kind of fun ones, but it kind of ends in a somber note, and it just has a nice kind of framing device with Tom Waits' score, and in between episodes it kind of goes to the globe and the earth spins and we go to another location. So that is number 7. Number 6 is his most recent one, and one that I only saw recently, but I was so impressed it went in at number 6. Obviously I might have to watch it a few more times and probably redo the list again. But this is Patterson, with Adam Driver of Kylo Ren Star Wars fame. This is a quiet little film that I was going to just kind of give a 3 out of 5, but then something happens later in the film, and there's a scene later in the film that just kind of changed my perception of it. Because I have to admit, there's a scene later in the film featuring an actor from a much earlier Jarmusch film that when I saw him, it put a smile on my face. And then the scene that he's in is just absolutely beautiful, and I was actually moved to tears. It's actually, strange enough, it's the last film that's actually made me weep like a small child, just because of that one scene, and I don't really know why, but I guess that's entertainment. Like I said, this is a quiet little film. It's about a bus driver, Adam Driver, strange enough, in Paterson, New Jersey, and he is a part-time poet. And because, I don't know whether it's because in my spare time I write mediocre poetry myself, I don't know whether it kind of struck a chord, and that's why I found the scene near the end with the actor from another Jarmusch film, I don't know, it was just such a lovely scene. But anyway, so this is about a bus driver who is a part-time poet, but he just keeps it in his notebook. His girlfriend keeps telling him to get it published, and he keeps putting it off. And Jarmusch shows the mundane, routine aspect of his life. So he kind of repeats the same kind of things. Getting up, going out of the house, talking to the guy at the bus station who's always complaining, going on his bus. Whatever happens during the day is different. Then coming back, and his mailbox is always at an angle, so he always straightens it before he goes in the house. So that's kind of repeated just to give you an idea of the routine aspect of his life. And again, not much happens. This is about people, it's about character, it's about the small details of lives. And then something happens which leads to the scene that made me weep like a small child. And it's just such a beautiful little film. Again, a million miles away in a completely different galaxy to Star Wars. Adam Driver gives a good performance. There's a nice extra, there's a Q&A with Adam Driver, and I didn't actually realise that he never watches his films after they've been made. He just doesn't have any interest in actually watching them once they've been made. But you should really check this one out because it's really very good. Yeah, and again, music's fantastic. The pacing, it gets you into a rhythm, and you just go with it. And it's a really rewarding film. And if I ever do like a top 20 films of the last 10 years, Paterson would probably be in it. Because it's just a great wee film. But again, it's not noisy, it's not loud, it doesn't go look at me. It's just a quiet, understated, beautiful little film. So we get to number 5, and this is Mystery Train, which you could argue is kind of episodic. It follows a group of people in Nashville, Tennessee, including a couple of Japanese tourists who are there to see Sun City Studios, even though the guy's more interested in Carol Perkins than Elvis Presley. There's a woman there to pick up the coffin of her husband. Joe Strummer makes an appearance with Steve Buscemi as a few idiot wastrels, and they all kind of converge in one hotel, which is run by Screaming Jay Hawkins. It is just wonderfully offbeat. I guess people might categorise it as being quirky. Again, fantastic music. It is an absolute blast, and it's just a lot of fun. But again, it's about people and places that aren't, normally shown, and that's really kind of the joy of Jarmusch's work. Mystery Train is highly recommended. The thing is, you can't really talk about plot points of Mystery Train because there's not really much of a plot. It's just following the strands of these people through the night, but it's awesome. Now, number 4 is the film it is on Blu-ray, but it's not. It deserves a better Blu-ray, I think. It's Ghost Dog: Way of the Samurai, which almost appropriately, this is a French Blu-ray. And again, this is the second Hitman film in Jarmusch's canon, but because it's Jarmusch, it's not your normal Hitman film. This stars Forrest Whitaker, who gives a fantastic performance, and he's a hitman who follows the way of the samurai, the way of the Bushido, and there's on-screen quotes from the Bushido, like, if you're on a mission, even if your head is cut off, you should still be able to finish your mission. Act as though you're dead already, which is great advice. Again, he's an urban hitman. He steals cars. He doesn't say a lot. He's very taciturn, word of the day. And he communicates through carrier pigeon, which is just hysterical. And he does jobs for the mob. But obviously a job goes wrong, and then the mob are after him. But this is Jarmusch, so it's not your typical mob film. Again, there's a French character who has an ice cream truck, and they don't speak the same language, but again, they kind of understand each other. So there's still that kind of thread of internationality and different languages, but you can still communicate because we still have the same problems and issues. I don't know, I think this might be his most successful film. I could be wrong as far as box office. I think it was pretty popular. And it's still Jarmusch, but there is more of a narrative drive in this one. And there's some really nice touches, like there's a couple of gangsters who are stopped by a female police officer, and one of them shoots her dead, and the other one says, "I can't believe you just shot a broad." Another guy says, "No, I shot a cop." If she wants equality, then she's got equality, which is a nice point. Again, the soundtrack's fantastic. I think RZA from Wu-Tang Clan did the soundtrack in this. I don't know whether that was his first soundtrack, because I think he's done quite a few since. Again, it's got such a cool vibe. One of the hits people might recognise from Senjin Suzuki's Branded to Kill as a little homage, shall we say. Yeah, tremendous fun. This might actually be one of the first ones, if you're not familiar with Jarmusch's work. This might be one of the first ones to check out. Because again, like I say, this has got more of a narrative. It's slightly more plot driven than perhaps the other ones. I should say this also stars Henry Silva, the fantastic Henry Silva, who gives a fantastic performance. Yeah, Ghost Dog at number 4. At number 3, again, this is a film that if I ever do a top 20 films the last 10 years or whatever, this would be pretty high on it. This is Only Lovers Left Alive, which is sublime. This is Jarmusch's vampire film, but again, this is Jim Jarmusch, so it's not your ordinary vampire film. What to say about this? Again, there's a wonderful score, and it gets you in to this atmosphere, into a vibe, and if you just go for it, you just ride that wave, and it's just sumptuous. It's a sumptuous film. It stars Tilda Swinton, it was absolutely fantastic, and Tom Hiddleston, who I'll admit I'm not the biggest Tom Hiddleston fan, but he's fantastic in this. Maybe it's because he's working with a great director. Maybe that's something to do with it. I don't know. And Mia Wasikowska, which I butchered her name, and Anton Yelchin. And John Hurt makes another appearance in a Jarmusch film and is fantastic. These are old vampires. I think Tilda Swinton's about 400 years old, and Tom Hiddleston's a toy boy because he might just be about 200 years old. And Jarmusch makes a brilliant point that I don't think's ever been brought up in any other vampire film, is the fact that Tom Hiddleston's real into music, so he's managed to kind of span the history of music, which is a really nice point. And also he's hung out with Byron and Shelley, who Tilda Swinton's character blames for making him so depressed. So their characters are called Adam and Eve. Make of that what you will. And Adam lives in a broken down area of Detroit in kind of isolation. Anton Yelchin is his kind of go-getter guy. And he's morose. He makes his own music, which is kind of dirge-like, on all these electric guitars from through the ages. Tilda Swinton is in Tangiers with John Hurt, who plays Christopher Marlowe, who allegedly may or may not have written all of Shakespeare's work. And Tom Hiddleston's more depressed than usual, so Tilda Swinton agrees to come over to Detroit to visit him, and of course can only take flights on planes that land at night time, which is a nice touch. And then they meet each other again because they're very much in love, and everything's going fine until Eve's sister turns up, played by Mia Wasikowska, which I will pronounce differently every single time I say it. and something happens, and then they end up having to go back to Tangiers. Yeah, I'm not going to say any more than that. That's the Soda Pictures version, but this is the plain archive edition, which I absolutely adore. It's absolutely beautiful. It is just, it does the film justice, because it's almost as beautiful as the film is. Again, this is a vampire film unlike any other vampire film. Tom Hiddleston, Adam and Eve both get their blood from hospitals and blood banks because they worry about contamination, and they just drink it in little glasses as you would a liqueur or something. It's just such a beautiful film. This is certainly one that I would start with if you're unfamiliar with Jarmusch's work. The plain archive edition is just absolutely gorgeous, and the film is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I'm not a romantic by any stretch of the imagination, but this is just such a romantic film, and everything about it is just sumptuous and gorgeous, and I highly recommend it. Again, if you just go with the flow and just let the mood and the vibe take you and go with it, it's just absolutely wonderful. So that's number 3, Only Lovers Left Alive. Number 2 is another black and white film, and it's Dead Man with Johnny Depp. So this is Jarmusch's Western, but again, this is Jarmusch, so it's not your typical Western. This stars Johnny Depp as William Blake, who is travelling west for a job at a factory. He turns up and there's no job, and through various events is caused to flee and becomes a fugitive on the run, and he meets an Indian who has no name, who confuses him for William Blake the poet, and they go on a road trip essentially, and that's the basic story. This has one of the most amazing casts ever assembled. It has Robert Mitchum in, I think, possibly his last film. Again, it's got John Hurt, it's got Alfred Molina, Gabriel Byrne, Lance Henriksen. I'm going to forget people. The guy with the husky voice, which I always forget what his name is. Gary Farmer plays Nobody, the Indian. Michael Wincott. It's an amazing cast. There's a lot of black humour in it. It's an 18 because there is strong violence. But it's just absolutely wonderful. Again, there's a pacing to it. There's a deliberate nature to it. But again, if you just let it go, it's just fantastic. Neil Young did the score for it, so there's lots of twangy guitars, and it's just such a great vibe. And it ends the right way. Johnny Depp gives a really good performance as somebody who's basically just confused the whole film. Gary Farmer's fantastic. He was caught by white men, taken over to England, part educated, that's how he knows who William Blake is, and then he was brought back, but his tribe disowned him, and that's why his name is Nobody. I forgot Billy Bob Thornton's in it, Crispin Glover's in it, Iggy Pop's in it, in drag. People eat beans. People get shot. It's a western, but it's Jarmusch, so it's a little bit different. It was shot by Robbie Mueller, who worked with Jarmusch a few times. So it's absolutely ravishing black and white. The Blu-ray looks beautiful. I think Criterion are actually releasing a couple of Jarmusch's in Blu-ray in April. I think Night on Earth's one of them. Yeah, Dead Man is just... It is a journey, and it's an awesome journey that I recommend you buy tickets for. So number 1, it's another black and white film, and I mean, probably numbers 1 to 4 you could probably switch around, but this is Down by Law. This is the Criterion DVD. And again, this is the Soda Pictures Blu-ray. And again, this is a film about characters that generally aren't really talked about. It's set in New Orleans, and it's the misadventures of Tom Waits, who plays a DJ, kind of out of work DJ, who gets a job driving a car but didn't check what was in the trunk and gets stopped by the police and winds up in jail. And John Lurie, who plays not a very likeable pimp, who gets entrapped and ends up in jail with Tom Waits. And then further down the film, Robert Benigni pops up and he's put in prison with him. And he, kind of being an outsider in the land, is a little bit confused and winds the other two of them up. And then, I don't think there's any spoiler alert, but they escape. And this being Jarmusch, we don't see how they escape. There's no plan. They're just in one day and then they're on the lam the next minute, because you don't need to know how they escape. And it's essentially just the 3 characters bickering. So why is this number 1, and why is it any good? Again, it's just the mood, the atmosphere, the vibe, the music. I'm biased just because I love Tom Waits, so Tom Waits, I could watch Tom Waits all day. It's just funny. It's, again, beautifully shot, beautifully edited. There's a lot of humour in it, and in the end it's quite poignant. Again, we don't know what happens to them. You know, there's no big resolution. Yeah, I'm not really selling this film very well, am I? But it's just a great film. That's the thing about Jarmusch. When I was prepping this video, when you actually do a list of your favourite directors or great directors, Jarmusch, very much like his characters, doesn't really get mentioned that much. But then when you actually look at the list of his films that he's made, you kind of go, he's made some truly great films. And again, American films, definitely American films, but with a global slant, to Asian cinema, to European cinema. Again, two of his biggest idols, Sam Fuller and Nicholas Ray. So, I mean, Jarmusch does always have a kind of unique slant on his subject matter. Again, his vampire film is unlike any other vampire film. His western is unlike any other western. His hitman films are unlike any other hitman film, apart from maybe Suzuki, which is obviously an influence. Yeah, I just don't think he gets enough credit, but he deserves more credit, and he certainly deserves more exposure. So thank you very much for staying with me if you did. And again, let me know in the comments what your top 10 Jarmusch films are, which ones you'd recommend, which ones you wouldn't recommend, and like or subscribe if you want to see more videos of this ilk. This is Solid Jerome saying thank you very much for taking the time, and we'll see you again.